Most men lose their wife to another man. I lost mine to a woman I'd never met, and I didn't understand that until a locksmith called me from my own garage. My name is Walter Pruett. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years teaching high school shop class in Tulsa, Oklahoma, before I retired, and I've been married to my wife Donna for 26 of those years. We will get to the garage, but first, do me one favor, would you? If you're the kind of person who sticks around for stories like this, go ahead and subscribe now, because it costs you nothing, and it means a great deal to an old man who still doesn't fully understand how any of this works. Hit that like button too. Drop a comment when you're done listening. Now let me tell you about my wife. Donna Marie Pruett, cabinetry teacher at the community college. Retired now, same as me. She keeps a rock garden out back that she tends like it owes her money, drinks her tea with honey and a little cinnamon, and reads mystery novels 2 at a time, one for the porch and one for bed. I used to joke that I knew that woman better than I knew my own hands. 26 years will do that to a man. Make him certain. Make him lazy about looking closely at things he thinks he's already seen. It started on a Monday in October, the kind of Oklahoma fall morning where the air finally turns honest after a summer of lying to you. Donna had left 4 days earlier to help her sister Pam move into a new place outside Little Rock. I was alone in the house, eating leftover chili for breakfast because there was no one around to tell me that wasn't a breakfast when I noticed the garage door wouldn't seal right. Kept catching on something, grinding a little at the bottom track. I've fixed enough garage doors in my life to know when a problem is beyond a can of WD-40, so I called a locksmith out of the phone book, the way I still do things, because I don't trust the internet to send me an honest man. He arrived within the hour. Name was Curtis Boone, young fellow, maybe 30. Wore his tool belt like he'd been born in it. Had a firm handshake and a Georgia accent thick as syrup. Nice enough kid. Told me to give him 20 minutes with the track mechanism, and I told him to holler if he needed anything, and I went back inside to finish my chili, which by then had gone lukewarm and somehow tasted worse for it. I was rinsing my bowl when my phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Curtis, who I could still hear working out there through the kitchen window. Mr. Pruett, there's a section of your garage wall that sounds hollow when I knock on it. Behind those old cabinet doors you've got mounted on the side wall. Did you know that? I remember laughing, actually laughing out loud, alone in my own kitchen, because I built those cabinets myself 12 years ago, hung them against the garage wall to store paint cans and Christmas decorations. And I typed back something like, "That's just where I keep the ornaments, son. Nothing back there but drywall and bad wiring." 3 dots appeared. Then his next message came through. And I want you to understand I read it twice because the first time my brain simply refused it. "Sir, there's a door back there. Small one. It's got a chain and a padlock on the outside, and I think I can hear something moving behind it." I stood there holding my phone like it might bite me. A door. In my garage. Behind cabinets I had built with my own 2 hands in a house I had lived in for 18 years. I want to tell you, my first thought was fear, but it wasn't. My first thought was that Curtis Boone was pulling some kind of prank, maybe trying to drum up extra work, tell an old man there's a mystery in his walls so he can charge to investigate it. That thought lasted about 4 seconds. Then I remembered the sound wasn't coming from Curtis's imagination. I could hear it too, faintly, through the window, a low, dragging sound, like something being pulled slowly across concrete. Something moving behind it. I read that phrase maybe 6 times, standing at my own sink before my legs finally remembered how to walk. I was out that back door and into the garage inside of 30 seconds, and there was Curtis, standing back from my old paint cabinets with his flashlight raised, looking at me the way you look at a man you're not sure how to break bad news to. The cabinets had been pulled a few inches off the wall, just enough to reveal a seam in the drywall behind them that didn't belong there, a rectangle, hinged, painted the same flat white as the rest of the garage. A door, exactly as he'd said. Small, maybe 4 feet high, built for crawling through more than walking. Chain wrapped twice around a bracket, secured with a heavy brass padlock. And from behind it, unmistakable now that I was standing close, that same low dragging sound, followed by something that might have been breathing, or might have been the wind finding a gap somewhere, Except there was no wind that morning, and I knew it. I want you to sit with that detail the way I had to. A padlock on the outside of a door built into a wall in my own garage, a door I never knew existed. You don't lock something out with a chain like that. You lock something in. I've built enough sheds, and enough birdhouses, and enough coffins, for that matter. I did carpentry work at my church for years, to know the difference between a door meant to keep intruders away and a door meant to keep something contained. This was the second kind. Call the police, I told Curtis, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. He already had his phone to his ear before I finished the sentence. 2 Tulsa PD officers arrived within 11 minutes, cut the chain with a bolt cutter one of them kept in his trunk, and I stood in my own garage at 64 years old, feeling like a stranger had rearranged my entire life while I was in the next room eating cold chili. The door swung open onto darkness, then a flashlight beam, then nothing. Empty. Not just empty, but tidy, like someone had swept it recently. A dirt floor crawl space, maybe 6 feet deep, 6 feet wide, just enough for a person to sit or lie down in. A small camping lantern in the corner, unlit, still warm, when the younger officer touched it with a gloved hand. And beside it, tucked into a shoebox, an old cassette player, the kind nobody's made in 30 years, with a speaker wire running to a cheap, portable speaker duct taped to the wall. The dragging hunt had been a loop, a recorded track of something being pulled across a hard floor, triggered remotely, playing over and over, into an empty hole in my garage wall. The younger officer, Deputy Ainsley, I'd learn his name later, picked up the cassette player and turned it over in his hands, like it might tell him something. Somebody started this recently, he said. Battery's warm. Someone triggered it while Curtis was standing right there, I said. And even as the words left my mouth, I felt the floor of my understanding shift underneath me, the way ice shifts on a pond right before you hear the crack. Someone had known a locksmith would be in my garage that morning. Someone had waited until he got close enough to those cabinets, then set that recording running, engineered specifically to make a stranger text a homeowner about breathing behind a wall, engineered specifically to put 2 Tulsa police officers standing in a hollow space in my house, looking at me like I was a puzzle they hadn't solved yet. This wasn't an accident. This was built. They found the receipt for the storage locker 2 days later, tucked inside a filing cabinet. I hadn't opened since the Clinton administration, though of course it hadn't been there 2 days ago. I don't know the exact moment I stopped being the man whose garage had a mystery in it and became the man the mystery pointed to, but it happened the way bad weather happens. Slow enough you don't notice until you're already soaked. One afternoon, Deputy Ainsley is asking me routine follow-up questions on my back porch. The next afternoon, a detective named Marcus Webb is sitting across my kitchen table with a legal pad, asking whether I'd ever rented a storage unit off Route 66 near the old fairgrounds. I told him no. Told him I'd never set foot in that place in my life. According to the paperwork, Mr. Pruett, he said, not unkindly, you rented Unit 208 14 months ago. Cash payment. Your signature on the agreement. I hadn't. I would have sworn on my mother's grave I hadn't. But there it was, a photocopy he slid across my own table, my name in handwriting close enough to mine that even I had to look twice. And when they opened that unit that evening with a warrant, they found a woman's coat, a prepaid cell phone activated under my name, and a photograph. A woman, maybe 40, blonde, laughing at whoever was holding the camera, with absolutely no idea her face was about to become the center of a missing persons case. Mr. Pruett, Detective Webb said, watching my face the way a man watches a poker table. This woman was reported missing 9 days ago in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Her name is Renata Fields. Do you know her? No, I said. And it was true. So true it felt like the only solid ground left under me. I have never seen that woman in my life. But here's what I didn't tell Detective Webb that night, because I needed to be alone with it first, needed to turn it over in the dark before I let another living soul touch it. When I got home from the station, I went straight up to our bedroom, to the nightstand on Donna's side, to the little wicker basket where she keeps the mystery paperbacks she's already finished. Spines cracked, corners soft from her thumb. I went through them one at a time, and there, tucked inside the back cover of an old Agatha Christie she must have read a dozen times, was that same photograph. Renata Fields, smiling, hidden in plain sight inside my wife's favorite book. I sat down on the edge of the bed we'd shared for 26 years, in a house that suddenly didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore, holding proof that my wife had known this missing woman's face long before I ever heard her name. I thought about every anniversary dinner, every Sunday drive to her sister's, every quiet evening watching her read that exact book with her tea steaming beside her, honey and cinnamon, unbothered, patient. How long had that photograph been living in that book? How long had Donna been building whatever this was, right there on her nightstand, 3 feet from where I slept every night of my life? If you've stuck with me this far, and you want more stories like this one, hit that subscribe button, would you? And the like button too. It helps more than you'd think. Here's something nobody warns an old man about being framed by the woman he married. It isn't the police that gets under your skin. It's realizing the person beside you for a quarter century wasn't confused, wasn't drifting, wasn't going through some phase you failed to notice. She was working the entire time. 8 days had passed since Curtis Boone texted me from my own garage. 8 days of Detective Webb parking his sedan a block down from my house, like I wouldn't notice a strange car idling on a quiet street at 64 years old. I noticed him every time. Donna came home from Little Rock 2 days after the garage incident. I hadn't told her the details over the phone, just that something had happened and she needed to come back. And when she walked through our front door, she looked exactly the way a frightened wife should look. Wide eyes, both arms around my neck, her face pressed into my shoulder. Walter, my God, what happened? Are you all right? And Lord help me, for the better part of an hour, I believed every word. She cried real tears, or tears that looked real enough that I still can't say for certain there's a difference. She held my hand while I walked her through the cabinets, the chain, the padlock, the little cassette player looping its recorded dragging sound into an empty hole in our garage. She said everything a frightened wife is supposed to say. That's horrifying, Walter. Who would do this to us? Should we call a lawyer? That question sat wrong with me for days before I understood why. Us. She kept saying us, like the mystery belonged to both of us equally, like she wasn't already 3 steps ahead of wherever it was going to lead. The storage unit cracked her performance, but only for a heartbeat. When Detective Webb came back 4 days later and laid out what they'd found in Unit 208, I watched my wife's face, the way you watch a horizon for weather. Most people wouldn't have caught it. A stillness, maybe half a second long, like a record skipping before the needle finds its groove again. Then the tears returned, right on schedule. Someone is doing this to Walter, she said, gripping my hand across the table hard enough to hurt. This is obviously somebody setting him up. My husband has never been anywhere near that storage place in his life. Detective Webb looked at her a long moment. Mrs. Pruett, he said carefully, how do you know it's obvious? She didn't hesitate. Because I know my husband. I turned that sentence over in my head, maybe 300 times in the days that followed. She didn't say he'd never do such a thing. She didn't say it was impossible for a man like me. She said she knew me, which is a different claim entirely, a claim about certainty rather than character, the kind of answer a lawyer gives dressed up in a wife's trembling voice. I have an old friend named Sal Cordero. We taught at the same school for 2 decades, him in the metal shop, me in wood, and after he retired, he started doing private fraud investigation work for a small firm downtown, mostly insurance claims, the kind of job that makes a man permanently suspicious of every polished story he hears. I called him on day 9 and told him everything from the beginning. He was quiet a long while on the other end of the line. Walter, he finally said, how many accounts do you and Donna share? 2, I told him. Checking and the savings we'd been building for a cabin up near Grand Lake we always talked about buying someday. Who handles them? He asked. I opened my mouth and realized I didn't have a fast answer. Donna did. Had for close to 15 years, ever since I mentioned once that I found the online banking confusing, and she offered, easy as anything, to take it over. I hadn't thought twice about it since. Bills got paid. The cabin fund grew steady, a few hundred a month. Everything looked exactly the way it should. Pull every statement you can get your hands on, Sal said. Go back at least 6 years. I pulled 8. What I found wasn't dramatic, and that was the part that scared me most. No big withdrawals. No wire transfers to some account in another country. Nothing a movie would bother filming. Just small, patient, quiet movements. $40 here to an account I didn't recognize. A recurring charge to a business name that meant nothing to me. A cash withdrawal every few months, always small enough to slide under the radar, never enough to trip a bank's alarm. Over 8 years, it came to just under $51,000, moved so carefully I'd never once noticed a ripple. I sat at my workbench in the garage at 2 in the morning, right beside that hollow space in the wall, staring at those numbers on a legal pad, and I felt something I can only describe as cold in a very particular way. Not the cold of fear, the cold of finally understanding the size of a thing. Because this wasn't a woman who'd made a rash decision after some hard year. The first small irregular transfer was dated 11 months after our wedding. She had started this while we were still hanging our first curtains together. Sal came by the next morning, and we spread it all across my workbench: bank statements, the storage locker paperwork, the police report, a timeline I'd drawn out in pencil the night before. He studied it a long time without saying a word, which from Sal is its own kind of alarm bell. "The storage unit," he finally said. "Walk me through where your phone was the night before that lease got signed." "Charging," I told him, "on my nightstand, same as every night for 26 years. "And where was Donna sleeping?" he asked. "Beside me," I said, and the sentence died in my mouth as I heard it out loud. She had taken my phone while I slept, driven out to that storage place near the fairgrounds, signed a lease in a hand close enough to mine to pass, paid in cash, and been back under the covers before my alarm ever sounded. I thought hard about the mornings after, whether she'd seemed tired, distracted, off in any way I could have caught. I couldn't remember, because on those mornings I was thinking about grading papers, or mowing the lawn, or whatever ordinary thing fills an ordinary man's ordinary Tuesday. 26 years of not looking closely enough. "The garage call," Sal said quietly. "You said you called the locksmith yourself that morning. From which phone?" "Mine," I said, already feeling the floor tilt again. "I don't keep a landline anymore." "Pull your call log," he said, and I already knew, somewhere underneath my ribs, exactly what I was going to find before I found it. The call to Curtis Boone's locksmith company had gone out from my number at 8:12 that morning, while I was standing in the driveway retrieving the newspaper. A fact I could prove because my neighbor Hal had waved at me from his own driveway at that exact time, and we'd talked about the Cowboys for a solid 5 minutes. Donna had made that call from my phone, taken again, or perhaps never fully returned, and used it to schedule a locksmith she knew would end up standing at those cabinets, knocking on that hollow wall, hearing that dragging sound, and texting me straight into a panic she'd built for that exact purpose. She had engineered the whole first act, start to finish. The loose garage door, which Sal now suspected she'd tampered with herself to guarantee I'd call someone out. The hidden crawl space, built or found and prepared who knows how long ago. The cassette recording, the shoebox, the timing of it all. She had been 3 states away at her sister's, and with one phone call or one remote trigger, set the entire machine turning while I sat inside eating chili and hearing nothing. "Walter," Sal said, and his voice dropped into the register men use right before they say something they'd rather not have to. "This isn't a plan a person builds in a few weeks. The money alone goes back 8 years. Learning to forge your signature convincingly enough to fool a notary, that takes real practice. She didn't just study you." He paused a long moment. "She made a career out of you." I stood up and walked out to the backyard, past the rock garden Donna tended so carefully every spring, the one I'd hauled 2 truckloads of Riverstone home for myself, and I thought about every Saturday I'd spent helping her arrange those rocks just so, while the whole time she'd been arranging something else entirely, something with me sitting in the middle of it like a stone she'd already decided exactly where to place. At 64, I'd always figured the worst thing waiting for a man my age was his knees giving out, or his heart, or his memory. Turns out the worst thing is discovering the woman who's poured your coffee every morning for a quarter century was never fully in the room with you at all. If you're still with me, and you want these stories to keep coming, go ahead and hit subscribe, and drop a like while you're at it. Truly, it helps more than you know. Here's something nobody tells you about being set up by your own wife. The evidence isn't the hard part. The hard part is understanding that the woman beside you was never lost, never distracted, never simply drifting through some private trouble of her own making. She was always, every single day, at work. I had one move left, and I hadn't told Sal about it yet, hadn't told a living soul, because the only way it would work was if Donna believed all the way down to her bones that her plan had already succeeded. She needed to feel safe, needed to feel like she'd already won, long enough for me to finish what I'd started. There is a particular kind of stillness that settles over a man once he stops being frightened and starts being deliberate. I found mine on a Tuesday morning at my workbench, cold coffee at my elbow and 8 years of bank statements spread out under the shop light, and I made a decision I haven't lost a single hour of sleep over since. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't confront Donna. I didn't march back to Detective Webb with what Sal and I had pieced together, because evidence only carries weight if the man handing it over still has any credibility left. And right then, in the eyes of the Tulsa Police Department, I was a 64-year-old retired shop teacher whose name sat on a storage lease connected to a missing woman. My word wasn't worth much at that particular moment. Donna had accounted for that too. Of course she had. So I did the one thing she hadn't planned for. I stopped being predictable. First, I called my younger brother, Ray. Ray Pruett, retired from the Army Corps of Engineers, lives out near Broken Arrow, the kind of man who fixes his own truck engine and has never once in his life raised his voice about anything. I drove out to see him on a Wednesday, told Donna I needed a few days to clear my head, and watched her face fold itself into the perfect shape of a worried wife giving her husband space. "Take whatever time you need, honey," she said, and I nearly smiled right there in the doorway. At Ray's kitchen table, over black coffee and a plate of his wife's biscuits, I laid the whole thing out for him, start to finish. The garage, the storage locker, the bank records, the phone logs, the photograph tucked in the back of that Agatha Christie novel. Ray listened without saying a word, which for him is roughly equivalent to another man breaking down entirely. When I finished, he sat quiet for a long stretch. "You said she's got a friend," he finally said. "Someone she talks to a lot." "Sherry Kowalski," I told him. "Known each other since before Donna and I ever met. They talk on the phone most weeks, sometimes for hours. Sherry drives up from Dallas a few times a year." "Where does Donna take those calls?" Ray asked. "The back sunroom," I said. "Always with the door shut." Ray nodded slowly, the way he does when he's already 3 steps ahead of you. "How long have you had a listening device out there?" he asked, dead serious. "I don't," I said. "I know you don't," he said, "but you're about to. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a vengeful man by nature. I spent 31 years teaching teenagers how to safely operate a table saw without losing a finger, which requires more patience than most people ever have to summon in a lifetime. I've never raised a hand to another soul outside of a boxing gym. I stopped going to 15 years back. Revenge simply isn't how I'm built. But I am, and always have been, a very patient man. And patience turned out to be the only currency that mattered from here on out. Ray ordered a small audio monitor online, paid cash for the shipping at a UPS counter, had it sent to a post office box 2 towns over. The kind of careful precision that 30 years in the Army apparently never lets a man forget. I drove home that Saturday, let Donna hold me in the doorway a long moment while I counted her heartbeats against my chest and felt, strangely, nothing at all. Not rage, not grief. Just a clean, quiet clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I installed the little monitor on a Sunday afternoon while Donna was at the grocery store, tucked behind a ceramic planter on the sunroom windowsill that hadn't moved an inch in 18 years, not by her hand or mine. Took me under 5 minutes. I drove back out to Ray's that evening, confirmed the feed came through clean on his laptop, then drove home in time for supper. Donna had made pot roast, asked if I was feeling more like myself. "Getting there," I told her. She smiled and topped off my sweet tea. I waited 17 days. 17 days of being Walter Pruett, devoted husband, cooperative, and patient with Detective Webb's ongoing questions, letting Donna squeeze my hand in front of him and perform her worry so convincingly that even I had moments, brief and disorienting, where I wondered if grief had made me imagine the whole thing. Then, on a Thursday evening in the 3rd week, Sherry Kowalski drove up from Dallas for a visit. I made myself scarce, told Donna I was heading to Sal's for the evening, kissed her cheek at the door, and drove exactly 6 blocks before I pulled over and opened the app on my phone. The audio came through clear as a bell. They talked for close to 20 minutes about ordinary things: Sherry's grandkids, a church potluck, a new restaurant off Route 66 worth the drive. I almost convinced myself I'd made a foolish, paranoid old man's mistake, planting a listening device in my own home based on grief and a retired insurance investigator's hunch. Then Donna's voice changed. Not loud, not sudden, just a shift, like a musician sliding from one key into another. Same voice, entirely different intention underneath it. He still has no idea, Donna said. Not a clue. Sherry was quiet a moment. You're certain? He's out there mowing the lawn, making you sweet tea, letting that detective circle him like a hawk. That's exactly who Walter is, Donna said, and there was something in her tone I'd never once heard directed at me in 26 years. He sees what's right in front of him and nothing past it. He always has. And the woman? Sherry asked. Renata? Comfortable, Donna said. She agreed to stay out of sight 90 days. I'm paying her enough that she won't say a word. By the time those 90 days are up, Walter will be so buried in this investigation it won't matter anymore. There was a pause. Then Sherry, her voice careful, almost hesitant. Donna, what actually happens to him? He becomes the answer to a question the police are already asking, Donna said. Calm as anything, like she was reading off a grocery list. They've got his name, his signature, his bank trail. I just have to let it keep building on its own now. A few more weeks and it won't need my hand in it at all. And where will you be? Sherry asked. Somewhere warm, Donna said, and then she laughed, easy and light, the exact laugh of a woman who's watched a plan come together exactly the way she drew it up. I sat in my truck 6 blocks from my own house, listening to my wife laugh about the machinery she'd built to bury me, and that same cold stillness dropped over me all over again, steady and complete. I want to tell you about Renata Fields, because she deserves that much. 2 days after Sherry's visit, I hired a retired Tulsa detective named Owen Blackwood, a friend of Sal's, a man built like a filing cabinet with reading glasses. I gave him one job: find her. It took him 5 days. She was in a budget motel outside Memphis, paying cash, registered under a name that wasn't quite hers. Owen got photographs, got her talking, got a signed and notarized statement from a woman who, once a real investigator, sat across from her, explaining exactly what the word accomplice meant under Arkansas law. Turned out to be far less comfortable with her arrangement than she'd been 90 days earlier. Renata Fields wasn't a criminal at heart. She was a woman in a hard financial spot who made a choice she deeply regretted. She told Owen everything: how Donna had found her through a mutual acquaintance, what she'd been promised, how she'd been coached to disappear and stay quiet. She signed her name with a shaking hand and cried for a good 10 minutes afterward, and Owen sat with her the whole time, because for a man who looks like a filing cabinet, he's surprisingly gentle. I now had a recorded conversation from my own sunroom and a signed statement from a missing woman who was never actually missing. 2 things Donna had no idea existed. Here's what I chose not to do. I didn't walk straight into the police station and hand it all over, because evidence delivered by a man still under suspicion becomes part of a slow legal grind, months of lawyers and continuances, plenty of time for Donna to go quiet and start dismantling whatever she needed to dismantle. She was good at dismantling things. I understood that clearly now, so I did something simpler. On a Friday evening, while Donna sat out in the sunroom with her tea and her paperback, I sat down at my workbench and sent 2 files from an email account she'd never once seen to a phone number she wouldn't recognize, an audio clip, a photograph of Renata Fields, alive, healthy, holding up that morning's newspaper outside a Memphis motel. No message attached, no explanation. I closed the laptop, rinsed my coffee mug, and went up to bed. She came upstairs a little over half an hour later. I watched through barely open eyes as she stood frozen in the bedroom doorway, phone still in her hand, completely still. In 26 years of marriage, I had never once seen Donna Pruett stand that still. She was always moving, always adjusting something, arranging something, managing some small detail of our life I never even noticed needed managing. She stood in that doorway like a woman who'd just heard a sound she couldn't place and couldn't shake. Good, I remember thinking. Good. The next morning I drove to Detective Webb's office and set Owen's full report on his desk. Statement, photographs, financial records, phone logs. Every scrap of it organized inside a manila folder, because I've never been a man to hand over anything less than tidy. Webb read through it without lifting his head for a solid 10 minutes. Mr. Pruett, he finally said. Marcus, I said. I think we both already know I never rented that storage locker. He looked at me a long moment, then reached for his phone. Donna was arrested on a Monday morning. 11 charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. They walked her out our front door in handcuffs at 8:15, the air cold enough that morning that you could watch your own breath hang there a second before it disappeared. I stood on the porch and watched. She looked back at me exactly once, just before they guided her into the patrol car, and for the first time in 26 years, I couldn't read a single thing behind her eyes. Couldn't find the calculation she'd hidden there, my whole marriage. She just looked at me, and I nodded, because here's the thing Donna never once understood about her own husband, the single crack running through her otherwise flawless plan. She spent years watching everything I did, every place I went, the exact shape of my signature, the pattern of my sleep. She never once bothered wondering what I was actually thinking while she watched. I'm 64 years old. I don't make speeches. I don't slam doors on my way out of a room. I've never needed the last word in my life. I only ever needed the last move. She spent 18 years, by my count, building a case against me brick by careful brick. I built her one in 19 days. Somewhere out there tonight, Donna Marie Pruett is looking over her shoulder for a husband she was certain she understood completely. A man. She was so sure she'd figured out down to the last habit that she never once considered he might be paying just as much attention as she was. She knew my signature better than her own. She never once knew what was underneath it, and that, in the end, was always going to be the one thing she got wrong. If this story found something in you, do an old man a kindness and hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what you'd have done in my shoes. Thank you, truly, for sitting with me through this one. I'll see you in the next.